They called it the Green Hell. 40 kilometers of jungle so dense that sunlight became a memory. A place where the air itself felt alive, thick, wet, suffocating. Where the heat didn't just make you sweat, it made you rot. Your boots, your skin, your mind. By the summer of 1968, the Ashaw Valley had earned its reputation. Hundreds of men had walked into those mountains. Not all of them walked out. And the ones who did, they brought back stories that didn't make it into the official reports. Stories about things that moved through the trees without sound. Figures that stood at the edge of clearings and watched. Shadows darker than the jungle night itself. Shadows that didn't bleed when you shot them. The officers called it exhaustion, heat stroke, malaria dreams. The men who saw them knew better. This is the story of a 4-man patrol that went into the valley on the night of June 12th. Only 3 came back, and none of them could agree on what they'd seen. But they all agreed on one thing. Something was watching them. Something that wasn't human. Something that didn't belong to this world. The insertion was silent. The helicopter dropped them at dusk, blades chopping the humid air into submission before pulling away and leaving them alone. The jungle swallowed the sound in seconds. And then there was nothing. No birds, no insects, no wind. Just silence. The kind of silence that presses against your eardrums, that makes you aware of your own heartbeat, your own breathing, the creak of your gear, the mud sucking at your boots with every step. The team moved in single file. The point man led, his eyes scanning the darkening forest, reading the terrain like a language only he understood. Behind him, the others followed. Radio operator, team leader, rear guard. All of them exhausted. All of them on edge. They'd been out for 2 days already. 72 hours of low crawling through elephant grass and wading through leech-infested streams. 72 hours of watching the tree line, waiting for the crack of a rifle, the whistle of a mortar, the sudden bloom of an ambush. But none of that came. Instead, there was only the feeling of being watched. Night fell fast in the jungle. One moment, the canopy above filtered the dying light into a dim green haze. The next, it was black, complete, impenetrable. The kind of darkness that made you question whether your eyes were even open. And then the rain started. Not a drizzle, a monsoon. Water that fell in sheets so thick it blurred the world into a wall of noise. It hammered the leaves. It turned the ground into a river of mud. It made it impossible to see more than a few feet in any direction. The patrol stopped, found a cluster of trees on a low ridge, set up a perimeter. No fire, no light. Just 4 men sitting in the dark, trying not to drown in the rain, trying not to think about how exposed they were. The point man took first watch. He sat with his rifle across his knees, staring into the curtain of rain. His eyes ached from straining, his body screamed for sleep. But he didn't close his eyes. He couldn't. Not here. Not in this place. And that's when he saw it. A shape, standing in the clearing, maybe 30 meters away. At first, he thought it was a tree, but trees don't shift weight. And this thing moved. Just slightly, a subtle adjustment, like someone standing at attention. His pulse quickened. He reached out slowly, tapping the team leader on the shoulder. The leader crawled forward, squinting through the rain. He saw it too. The figure was tall, impossibly tall. 7 feet, maybe more. Its silhouette was blurred by the darkness and the rain, but its outline was unmistakable. Human-shaped, but wrong. The proportions were off, the limbs too long, the posture too still. The team leader raised his hand, a silent signal. The other two soldiers woke instantly, weapons up, eyes searching the darkness. And then they saw the others. Not just one figure, 5, 10, more, standing at the edge of the tree line, all of them motionless, all of them facing the patrol, all of them watching. The rear guard's hands began to shake. He centered his sights on the nearest figure and waited for it to move, to raise a weapon, to do something. But it just stood there. And then, slowly, it started walking. Not fast, not slow, just a steady, measured pace. No attempt at cover, no tactics, just walking. Through the rain, through the mud, straight toward them. The point man opened fire. The muzzle flash lit up the jungle like a strobe. 3-round burst, the sound shattered the silence. Brass casings ejected into the mud. The figure jerked. He saw the round's impact, but it didn't fall. It didn't even slow down. The team leader gestured frantically. The others opened fire. All 4 rifles erupting at once. The noise was deafening. Muzzle flashes strobed the darkness, illuminating the rain in frozen snapshots. The figures stood in the light for brief moments, tall, black, featureless, before the darkness reclaimed them. But they didn't fall. Some of them simply dissolved, like smoke, like shadows pulled apart by the light. And then, seconds later, they reformed, closer than before. The radio operator fired a full magazine, 20 rounds. He saw them hit, saw the impacts ripple through the figure like water disturbed by a stone. But there was no blood, no bodies, nothing. The rear guard ejected his empty magazine, hands fumbling for a fresh one. His breath came in short, panicked gasps. His vision tunneled. He fired again and again. The shadows kept coming. And then, from somewhere deep in the valley, they heard something else. A whistle. High-pitched, human. Then the crack of rifle fire. Real rifle fire. AK-47s. The unmistakable sound of an enemy patrol responding to the noise. The team leader made a cutting motion across his throat. Cease fire. They stopped shooting. But the damage was done. Their position was compromised. The shadows had drawn them into a trap. From the ridge above, tracer rounds began to arc through the rain. Green and red streaks cutting through the darkness. The distinctive thump of a mortar launch echoed across the valley. The team leader pointed down the slope. They ran. The jungle became a nightmare of mud and roots and thorns. They crashed through the undergrowth, slipping, falling, clawing their way forward. Behind them, the gunfire intensified. Bullets snapped through the trees. A mortar round detonated somewhere to their left, the shockwave knocking the radio operator off his feet. But the shadows were still there. The point man saw them moving through the trees, not running, just walking, keeping pace, always at the edge of his vision. Silent, patient, waiting. He fired blindly over his shoulder. The team leader grabbed him, pulled him forward. They couldn't stop. If they stopped, they died. The radio operator screamed into the handset. Coordinates, grid reference, emergency extraction. The voice on the other end was garbled by static, but the message got through. 5 minutes. They had 5 minutes to reach the landing zone. They ran. The rear guard turned and fired a burst behind them. He saw muzzle flashes answering from the darkness, but he couldn't tell if they were enemy soldiers or the shadows or both. Everything blurred together. The rain, the darkness, the tracers, the shapes moving between the trees. He stopped trying to tell the difference. He just ran. The helicopter came in low and fast. No lights, just the sound of rotors cutting through the storm. The LZ was a small clearing at the base of the ridge, barely large enough for the skids to touch down. The 3 survivors broke from the tree line and sprinted toward it. The point man dove through the open door first. The radio operator followed. The team leader turned back, scanning the jungle, his rifle up. The rear guard wasn't behind them. The team leader hesitated, just for a second. Then the crew chief grabbed him and hauled him into the cabin. The helicopter lifted off immediately, banking hard to the left as bullets stitched the air where it had been. As they climbed, the team leader looked down through the open door. The clearing below was filled with figures. Dozens of them, hundreds maybe, standing in the rain, motionless, all of them facing up, all of them watching the helicopter rise into the night. And at the edge of the tree line, barely visible in the darkness, he saw the rear guard, standing, staring up at the helicopter, his rifle on the ground beside him, his arms hanging limp at his sides. And next to him, towering over him, was one of the shadows. The team leader reached for his weapon, but the helicopter banked again and the jungle disappeared into the clouds. The debriefing was short. Enemy contact, 1 man missing, mission aborted. The team leader didn't mention the shadows, neither did the others. But in the months and years that followed, they told their story, separately, without coordination, and the details never changed. They saw something in the Asha Valley, something that watched them, something that walked among them, something that wasn't alive. The official record lists the rear guard as missing in action. His body was never recovered. But the men who were there know the truth. He didn't die in combat. He was taken by something that lives in the darkness between the trees. Something that feeds on fear and exhaustion and the thin edge of sanity. Something that still walks the green hell. Watching. Waiting.